guys, how you doing? So we're back once again with part 20 of the classic mini winter workshop. So in this episode it's a bits and pieces episode really, so it's lots of little edits and bits of video clips that I've done that have maybe not made it into other episodes, but I thought I'd put them all together in this one. So there's no particular theme around this, it's really just me dicking around in the workshop. So I don't know whether I'll call it dicking around in the workshop, but it might make it interesting to subscribers anyway. So yeah, hope you enjoy it, and I'll try and give it a bit of an explanation as we go through. So we're just on the back of Brooklands, so Brooklands mini show, great day out, really enjoyed it. The weather wasn't bad, I don't think it was as good as it was forecast to be, but it didn't rain, it was dry, it wasn't too cold. Lots of nice minis to see there. It's nice to see they've done Brooklands up a little bit as well. So the aircraft hangars are looking great now. You can see what would have been the old runway now, or start finish straight. That's looking a lot better. And I really enjoyed it actually. The only thing that lets it down, I've noticed over the last few years, is the trade gets worse and worse each year. I mean, it was really poor this year. A couple of places to get new mini bits and a bit of auto jumble, but I don't know why that show doesn't do better with trade. It's a bit of a shame. I didn't really pick up anything in particular, just picked up a couple of valeting bits. So I got some just foam applicators from a retailer there that was selling car cleaning gear, and I got some 200-gram fine grade clay bars. So they're a tenner, but I think if you buy, I think it's like an 80-gram clay bar from Halfords, Maguire's ones, I'm sure they're more than a tenner just for one 80-gram bar, so that's pretty good value, that is. Also been buying some other bits over the last week or so. So I bought some Maguire's Ultimate Paste Wax from Halfords. That was really expensive, that was. I think retail price it was about 30 quid, but they had some offers on, I'm sure it was about 25 quid I paid, but it's a really, really good wax that, and the thinking is with that, I'll give the car a really good clean and clay bar at the beginning of the year, apply this maybe once or twice during the year, and just give it a quick wet wash off in between, and it should keep it looking great. So it's expensive, but hopefully it shouldn't mean I'm polishing the car every other weekend. Aside from that, my friend got me some colour coded cable ties, so I don't know where they come from, but how cool are they? And I saw Macklin's was closing. Bit of a shame. I like Macklin's, it's great for going and getting bits and bobs, certainly little electrical bits. I suppose eBay's killed off Macklin's now. If you want a little funny spade connector or a little terminal or an electrical plug or something like that, in the past pretty much Macklin's was your only hope, but now you just go on eBay, you order one up and it's fine. So I went into Macklin's a week or so ago, thought I'd go and get a big parts haul, stuff to stock up with, and I come out with a pack of cable ties and some GU10 LED bulbs for home. So didn't really spend a great deal of money, but it's all useful stuff. You can never have enough cable ties. One of the other things about Brooklands that I really enjoyed this year was I met Paul P there. So Paul P has a YouTube vlog as well. I'm old workmates with Paul, so I know him very well as well. And his friend and fellow workmate of mine was there actually, Carl, with his 1.8 VVC orange Rover K-Series Mini. They've done a K-Series conversion on it tail end of last year, so it runs 160 brake horsepower. It's a 1.8 VVC engine. The most remarkable thing about this car is that it's like Vinny, where you shut the bonnet, it looks completely standard, and for a Mini that's got a K-Series in, that's almost unheard of. So they've not extended anything, it hasn't got extended wings, extended bonnet or anything like that. When you shut the bonnet, it's a completely standard round nose Mini, running 160 brake horsepower, so that will be awesome. They're ironing out some little problems with it at the moment, just handling, getting the setup right, but I'm sure when that car's dialed in, that will absolutely fly. So I'm really looking forward to it. Carl, I'm calling you out actually. Santa Pod, let's get Vinny on the track. Hopefully by then I'll have nitrous on Vinny. I think that would be a really interesting race up the strip, that, but yeah, really looking forward to that. So in the first part of the video you'll see me using a thing called a Oscilloscope, which is basically an oscilloscope. It runs off a laptop computer and it gives you an oscilloscope waveform of voltage or current. I think it'll do other things as well, but in its basic form it does voltage and current. And I was using that on Vinny, and I'll explain more in later videos of the race car build, but towards the end of that we've ended up with loads of problems with our electrical glitches and gremlins caused by voltage spiking. So it's got a custom made wiring loom, it's got a high torque starter motor, it's got a race alternator and a lightweight battery, and we were having problems with voltage spiking. So I wanted to try it on Vinny just to get myself familiar with the software. And also so we had something to compare it with as well. So Vinny is pretty standard like that. It has a standard alternator, it has a standard starter motor, standard ignition system. So I just wanted to run it on that, get an idea of where we were starting so I could compare it with a race car. There are some interesting things you might pick up there without going into a huge amount of detail. So you'll notice when I do the oscilloscope trace, it shows a minimum voltage when the engine's cranking over. You can apply that minimum voltage to any car, particularly a Mini. So if you're a little bit concerned over whether your battery's any good, if you've got a voltmeter, if you put the voltmeter on the battery, disable the engine from starting somehow, so pull off the coil lead or something like that, crank the engine over and look at the voltage under cranking, so the minimum voltage the battery goes to while cranking. Don't crank it for more than sort of 5 to 8 seconds, but while it's cranking it should not drop below 9 volts. If it does drop below 9 volts, chances are the battery's no good, or it certainly wants charging and then testing again. So little tip for you there with batteries there. While cranking, whatever car it is really, the battery should never drop below 9 volts while cranking. mini enthusiasts, just in case you're wondering what I'm up to here, I thought I'd run through a quick explanation. So this piece of software is called a Oscilloscope, which is basically an oscilloscope. It measures voltage and current. At the moment we're measuring voltage with it, and it measures voltage very fast and in very fine detail, so you can look down at a split second. So the divisions on here at the moment are set at 500 milliseconds, so each of these divisions is half a second. So from what we're looking at here, this is the voltage before I turn the key to crank the engine. You see this little dip around here will be the ignition circuit switching on, or maybe the solenoid switching on. That drops the voltage to 12.55, and then the starter motor kicks in. You see the voltage drop dramatically, and the starter motor starts to turn then. So it draws a lot of current, drops the voltage down to 9.2 volts. The engine starts to turn at this point. This little dip here is just going over a bit of compression, and again this dip here is when this is when the engine's reaching top dead centre, so there's a high amount of compression there. The engine's slightly harder to turn, so the voltage drops. What's quite interesting here, this is a warm engine, so I'd already started it, so that's why we started out with a static voltage of 13 volts up here. But what we can see is there's maybe 1, 2, 3, that's probably 2.5 compression strokes before the engine's actually running. So like I say, it's a warm engine, so on a cold engine you might see 5 or 6 compression strokes. But just to put that into context, if you look at the time, so I'd say the engine's actually running by itself, self-sustained at this point here. So from the moment the starter motor starts to turn, it's 1.058 seconds there, or let's just round that down to 1 second exactly. And if we go along here, and we'll say about here is where the engine is self-sustained, so it's running by itself now without the need of the starter motor turning it, and that's at 1.753 seconds. So basically 3/4 of a second, 753 milliseconds. That's how long it takes to start an engine. So if you've ever sat there with the engine cranking over, there's probably a problem with it. Most engines should start in that sort of time frame, less than a second really. If we go along further here, as you can see, the engine starts to run here. This point here, this is where the alternator kicks in and starts to recharge the battery. So you'll see it's 11.89 volts there. So the starter motor has stopped turning the engine's running by itself. It's reached enough RPMs for the the alternator to start charging. You see the charge rise there and stabilise, and once stabilised, 13.8 volts stable charging. So what we can do with this is we can dig in. So this is look at half-second intervals at the moment. You can really dig down into detail here. What I'm particularly interested in is any voltage spikes. So this is, I think I'll be worried about anything that's going above sort of 20 volts here. So we get a very slight voltage spike here. Not quite sure what caused that. That might have been the ignition key turning and switching on. We get the starter motor engaging here. There's not really a voltage spike there. And the other area we want to look at is once the starter motor disengages, which is up around here, and yet nothing to worry about, no voltage spikes there, so that's good. And so just moving on to the next part of dicking around in the workshop, you're about to see me play around with a thing called a Colortune plug. So this is not new technology, this is really old actually, probably dates back to the, I don't know, maybe the 60s or 70s. But what a Colortune plug does, it replaces the spark plug inside the cylinder, and you replace it with this tube here. So this is like the high tension wire, and the spark plug itself is glass. So you won't be able to see it on the video, but when you shine a light through the other end, I'm not sure whether I'll be able to do that. Let's give it a go. Yeah, maybe you can, I don't know. But it's glass, so you can actually see inside the combustion chamber of the car. What that helps you to do is set the mixture with the car. So years and years ago, when gas analyzers and that sort of thing weren't so accessible, weren't portable, they were certainly much bigger. If you wanted to check your emissions, if the mixture was right on the car, wasn't so easy to do. But you can do it with a Colortune plug, and you can still apply the same methodology to newer cars. It works in the same way. So when a flame burns, or when you get combustion in a car, the colour of combustion makes a big difference, or gives you a good indication of how that mixture is, how the engine is running. So if you get a yellow flame, that means there's too much fuel there, there's excess fuel, so the mixture's rich. And if it's blue, that pretty much means that you're getting a good burn. You're burning all the fuel within the cylinder. So you connect up the Colortune plug, you start the engine, you can look down and you can see the bright flash of combustion within the cylinder, and what you're looking for is a nice blue glow, almost like, you know, the British gas flame, or a gas flame burns blue. You should get a similar sort of blue combustion within the cylinder, and that means the mixture setting is correct. So you see me playing around with it here on PAL, which is a multi-point injection, modern fuel injection system. The mixture's all preset with it, you can't adjust anything, so it's a bit silly me playing around with that, really. The reason I was doing it is because I was testing Mark's GoPro Hero 6, and it does a 1080p at 240 frames per second, so I thought that was probably fast enough to slow it down to a point where you can see in each individual spark and combustion within the cylinder. So that's exactly what I've done there. So if you watch the video in a moment, it starts at full speed and then it'll slow down to 240 frames a second, and you actually see each combustion stroke within the cylinder. It's a little bit difficult to see just because of the lighting. The faster you go with a camera, faster frames per second, the less light you get, so difficult to see, but you can. What's interesting actually is you see a thing called wasted spark there, so you won't see this on old Minis with a distributor system, but with an MPI ignition system, it has a thing called wasted sparks. So if you're familiar with MPIs, they have a big coil pack on the front of the engine, and that actually fires twice per combustion cycle per cylinder. So the first spark of the spark plug is to ignite the fuel, and that's your combustion stroke. When it next comes up on the exhaust stroke, the spark plug fires again. It works pretty well doing it like that, because that secondary spark helps to clean the spark plug. So if there's any leftover unburnt fuel around the cylinder, that will make sure that's burnt and the tip of the plug is clean for the next combustion stroke. So when you watch the video, if you watch carefully, you'll see every other spark of the spark plug is combustion, and then there'll be just a blank spark plug fire in between, and that's what we call wasted spark. Finally guys, just on to the last bit of mucking around for the week. I said to you, I think it was last week or the week before, I bought some stuff called Dodo Juice Ferrous Jeweler. So it's alloy wheel cleaner. It's got this ferrous iron remover in there. When it reacts with iron particles on the wheel, it turns dark purple. Don't know whether it actually cleans the wheels any better. It does seem to do a pretty good job, to be honest, but it's quite satisfying to watch it react with the wheels. I used it on the Mini. There wasn't a great deal of brake dust on the Mini, although it does, you get quite a lot of purple in there. Used it on my wife's Vauxhall Astra where the wheels haven't been cleaned for months. and that really did turn purple. But I would say on my wife's car, I mean, one application of this, I left it to dwell, so I left it for about 5 minutes soaking in. One of the hubcaps I did have to get a bit of a brush and rub it in a little bit to completely get rid of it, but rinsed it down afterwards. All the brake dust has gone, so it works really well. I bought this bottle off eBay. I think it was under a tenner, it was £9 something. I think it's slightly more expensive if you buy it elsewhere. Is it worth it? Yes, I think so. Certainly if you've got really dirty contaminated wheels, it really cuts the elbow grease work, the hard work out of it. It does it for you. The only thing I would say, I've used that on the Mini, on my wife's Astra now, so a total of 8 wheels, and probably an eighth of the bottle has gone, so it's really thick actually. When you spray it on, it's not thin, it's not fine mist, it almost comes out, doesn't come out lumpy, but it's quite viscous. So I suppose it needs to be to stick to the wheel to get you that dwell time of reacting with ferrous particles. But it does work really well. I'll certainly buy it again. It's probably a little bit overkill for the Mini because the wheels never get that dusty. I'll keep them clean. But if you've got a car with really dirty wheels, loads of brake dust in there, I think that's worth every penny, to be honest.